In the instant the silver fire raven appeared, a trace of fear flickered across Cho-Woo's face. Yet, it was too late to retreat. With a determined grimace, he bit his tongue and spat 3 mouthfuls of blood essence onto the bowl in his hand. The moment the blood made contact, it vanished into the bowl, which began to hum loudly. Crimson light blazed from it, and a bloodworm emerged, roaring as it unleashed a torrent of blood towards the raven. The silver fire raven met the wave head-on, unleashing a flurry of fireballs that burst into silver flames, scorching the blood away and leaving a massive hole in the wave. The raven shot through the gap, charging at the worm and Cho-Woo. The man's hands flew into a series of rapid seals, and the worm surged forward, imbued with law and power. Blue light flashed in Han Li's eyes as he readied himself, his hand sealing the fire raven's retreat. At that moment, the worm's runes exploded, releasing a dense blood mist that swallowed the raven. A shrill cry sounded as the raven broke free, battered and stained with blood, but Han Li's swift actions evaporated the blood with a wave of silver flame. The raven vanished into his sleeve, but the worm's assault had eroded it severely. Cho-Woo, clearly strained from the battle, ripped his robes. Revealing a black hole in his belly, he summoned the remnants of the bloodworm, which surged back into his body, transforming him into a towering crimson giant. His skin became covered in translucent scales as his eyes turned to rubies. Without hesitation, Han Li charged at the giant, ready to face the behemoth head-on. Cho-Woo grinned with malevolent glee, raising his hand to strike down upon Han Li. But Han Li met the blow with his fist, and the ground trembled as the impact sent shockwaves through the area. The crimson giant staggered but held its ground, only to falter when Han Li surged into the air and descended upon it like a falling star. The giant retaliated, but Han Li's fist, surrounded by starlight, shattered its arm and pierced its chest, tearing the giant asunder. The giant crumbled into a pile of crystals, and within one, Han Li glimpsed the miniature golden figure of Cho-Woo's nascent soul. Before Han Li could act, the soul detonated, scattering into blood mist that vanished into the ground. The battle had ended in a matter of seconds, to the astonishment of the watching immortals. Worm 8 and Worm 9 were elated by the turn of events, but the layman immortals were filled with dread. The woman in black and the burly man instantly fled, vanishing into the hole in the raised platform. Worm 8 and Lu Kun exchanged glances before moving toward Han Li, impressed by his power. Lu Kun, his voice tinged with awe, remarked on Han Li's deadly speed, while Worm 8 noted that without Han Li's swift action, the battle would have been far more difficult. The group quickly shifted their focus to the next step, escaping the underground palace. The strange crimson barrier that had thwarted previous attempts at breaking free hinted at powerful laws of blood binding the space. Despite Han Li's inspection, no vulnerabilities could be found. As Lu Kun attempted to contact Worm 3, Worm 8 began gathering the fallen immortals' treasures, suggesting they prepare for further trials. After sorting the spoils, Han Li claimed the coveted black spike from Worm 16. Despite Worm 8 and Lu Kun's silent rivalry over the treasure, they ultimately ceded it to Han Li, knowing his strength warranted it. Han Li's generosity in distributing the other possessions earned him their respect, and they focused their minds on the next challenge, finding a way to escape the cursed space. Once the spoils were swiftly divided, Han Li and his companions, Worm 8 and Lu Kun, went their separate ways, each determined to find a way out of the treacherous underground space. They knew well that they could not rest until they escaped the suffocating mystery of their surroundings. Han Li, ever vigilant, stood more than 1,000 feet away from the eerie statue, his bright-sight spirit eyes scanning the landscape with precision. Meanwhile, Worm 8 and Lu Kun, having recovered from their injuries, began their own investigations. Time passed, and despite their best efforts and varied techniques, the trio found no path to freedom. Han Li remained calm, but his companions' frustration grew, their impatience simmering beneath the surface. Then, without warning, the entire space quaked violently, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Before they could react, the earth split open with a deafening roar, and a torrent of blood-like mist surged from the depths, enveloping them in its cold, viscous grasp. The world spun uncontrollably around them, and when it finally stilled, they found themselves in a cavern even more vast and foreboding than before. This new underground realm was dominated by a blood-red lake, its surface bubbling with unnatural activity. The air was thick with crimson mist, filling the cavern with an eerie, oppressive silence. In the center of the lake, a massive flat island rose from the depths, its size resembling a vast plaza. At the heart of this plaza stood a palace, its outlines obscured by a dense, swirling crimson cloud. The place felt abandoned, yet every part of it exuded a sense of malevolent energy. As Han Li scanned the surroundings, preparing to release his spiritual sense, he realized something was amiss. The crimson mist in the air blocked his spiritual abilities, leaving him powerless to probe deeper. His companions were clearly disturbed as well, and Worm 8 swiftly conjured his earthly deity avatar to aid them. Just as they braced for more trouble, Han Li's sharp eyes caught movement below. Without warning, the ground tore open again, and monstrous bone claws erupted from the earth, reaching for their legs. The trio immediately took to the air to evade the grasping claws, but the ground continued to crumble, and a host of crimson skeletons emerged, each one radiating power equal to a body integration cultivator. The creatures let out low, menacing roars before charging toward the trio. From the lake, a group of winged naga monsters with serpentine bodies and long crimson hair also emerged, their power formidable enough to rival the skeletons. Surrounded on all sides by hundreds of these formidable foes, Han Li's trio was forced to fight for their lives. Worm 8 summoned 4 mighty azure wind dragons, which tore through the enemy ranks, sending skeletons and naga monsters flying. However, the creatures' unnatural resilience and regenerative powers proved troublesome, as the crimson mist around them swiftly healed their injuries. Lucan, in turn, summoned his own array of massive blue blades, each radiating the chilling power of ice, cutting through the enemy forces with violent force. Yet even his deadly strikes couldn't halt the endless tide of enemies. In contrast, Han Li's method was more direct. He unleashed powerful punches that shook the very air, obliterating everything in his path. However, no matter how many they defeated, the swarm of monsters only grew, emerging from the ground and the lake without end. Han Li, his mind sharp as ever, spoke to his companions. The palace at the center must hold answers, but we're too exposed here. We need to find a way out. Worm 8 and Lu Kun, sensing the urgency, looked to him for guidance. Han Li, ever calm under pressure, had noticed several anomalies in the cavern and hinted at possible escape routes. But dealing with the relentless onslaught of monsters would require time. "I'll handle these pests," Worm 8 declared, his voice cold. "You two focus on the exit." With that, Han Li launched himself into the air, punching through the ranks of enemies, creating a temporary gap in their encirclement. His form blazed with azure light as he soared toward a point in the cavern's ceiling, drawing the majority of the creature's attention. Meanwhile, Worm 8's earthly deity avatar expanded, unleashing an aura that slowed the monster's movements, giving him breathing room to execute his next move. Lu Kun, not one to be outdone, summoned a pair of watery blue figures from his avatar, sending them crashing into the burly man and the woman in black, the two previous adversaries who had fled earlier. The burly man, enraged, hurled a blood-charged punch at Han Li, only for it to meet the full force of the immortal's mighty fists. The shockwaves from their collision sent the man and woman crashing back through the air. But before they could recover, Lu Kun's avatars arrived, ready to strike again. It was clear that this battle was far from over. Every blow, every strike was only a fleeting moment in the greater storm of danger that had descended upon them. Amidst the swirling chaos, the woman in black swiftly formed a hand seal, causing her black mace to shimmer with dark light. Crimson patterns twisted across its surface, and with a mighty swing, it unleashed a torrent of fiery energy. Explosions rumbled through the air as massive projections of the mace emerged, each cloaked in searing crimson flames. The very air seemed to ripple and warp, distorted by the scorching heat. The two blue figures charged forward, cutting through the fiery storm as flashes of blue light surrounded them. They were momentarily weakened, but accelerated with newfound speed, reaching the burly man and the woman in black in the blink of an eye. Before they could react, the figures exploded into a cascade of glacial energy, freezing their forms in layers of crystalline blue ice. The ice spread rapidly, encasing them in towering blocks, their expressions locked in frozen horror. Yet, crimson light pulsed from within, and cracks began to appear. Meanwhile, Lu Kun paled as the blue aura of his earthly deity avatar dimmed, clearly strained by the power required to unleash such an attack. Just as the frozen duo readied to break free, Han Li appeared like a shadow, his golden-scaled fists smashing into the ice, shattering it in an instant. The burly man and the woman in black were expelled from their icy prison, their nascent souls darting toward the palace's gates below, seemingly drawn in by an unseen force. As they neared the gates, crimson hands of mist emerged from the swirling cloud, seizing the nascent souls with terrifying precision. Desperate pleas rang out, but their fate was sealed as they were pulled into the grasp of the hands, drawn into the crimson mist. A harsh voice echoed from within the palace, the sound of metal scraping metal. The figures of Han Li and his companions stiffened as the azure threads in the air faded. The skeletal guardians and Naga monsters dissolved into streaks of crimson light, drawn into the cloud. A towering figure emerged from the palace, cloaked in crimson light, with two enormous fireballs crackling behind it. The flames contained strange faces, Cho Wu and the purple-robed man, trapped within the fiery orbs. "Thank you for your service," the figure said, uncaring for the pleas of the nascent souls, raising a hand to crush the power of the Origin Restoration blood flames. The nascent souls were engulfed in balls of fire, their faces twisted in agony. Before the flames settled, their power fueling the growth of Gong Shuhong's strength. Han Li's group watched in stunned silence as the battle's stakes escalated. Gong Shuhong's aura surged, signaling his rise to the late true immortal stage, a power that would make this confrontation even more perilous. Han Li grimly acknowledged the growing threat, and the trio readied themselves for the battle ahead. Lu Kun, recognizing their limited options, swallowed a pill to fortify himself, while Worm 8 conjured protective treasures. Just as Gong Shuhong prepared to unleash his fury, a sudden spatial disturbance heralded the return of Worm 3. His body wreathed in flames. With a roar, he shot forward, transforming into a fiery worm, clashing with Gong Shuhong's summoned fiery python. The titanic beasts collided in an explosion of flames, and Worm 3 seized the moment to summon a massive crimson sword. Launching a devastating attack, the two powers clashed violently, sending shockwaves that rattled the entire cavern. "Worm 3 had us as bait," Lu Kun remarked grimly, acknowledging their role in this deadly game. "At this point, we must strike together," Han Li asserted, and they joined forces with their earthly deity avatars, charging toward the fray. Gong Shuhong dismissed them with a mere gesture, unleashing a suffocating blood mist that filled the air. As Han Li fought against its debilitating effects, Lu Kun's earthly deity avatar was pursued by a monstrous crimson creature. Its blurred face gleamed with malevolent red eyes, a harbinger of the dangers yet to come. In the skies above, Han Li soared swiftly, breaking free from the thick blood mist. As his foot neared the ground, his eyes flashed with cold resolve. Without hesitation, he unleashed a powerful punch aimed directly at a spot within the swirling mist. In an instant, a crimson figure shot from the mist, its claws extending with ferocious speed to strike at Han Li. The two forces collided with a thunderous crash, disintegrating into a violent explosion of energy. The crimson figure's arm shattered under the impact, sending it reeling back into the mist. Meanwhile, Han Li staggered briefly, but before he could fully regain his balance, a series of shrill howls echoed through the air. A sudden barrage of azure wind blades erupted, tearing through the blood mist to reveal Worm 8 engaged in a bitter struggle with another crimson creature. His earthly deity avatar, already battered and scarred, seemed barely able to keep up. Not far off, Lu Kun's earthly deity avatar, which had fallen previously, had now risen to join him in combat against yet another crimson fiend. As this unfolded, the crimson creature Han Li had struck earlier surged back from the mist, its severed arm regenerated in an instant. With renewed fury, it dashed at Han Li again, a blur of crimson. But Han Li, undeterred, met the assault head-on, launching a flurry of punches that battered the creature further. Yet, even as the blows landed, crimson threads shot from its wounds, knitting its flesh back together in an unnerving display of regeneration. Realizing the creature's resilience, Han Li's expression darkened. This blood mist-infused fiend was far from ordinary, akin to the water giant Lu Kun had once summoned. It thrived in this environment, rendering brute force nearly useless. If this continued, Hanli feared his allies, Worm 8 and Lu Kun, would soon be overwhelmed, their injuries mounting. Above, the battle raged on as Gong Shuhong struggled against 6 blood-mist tigers, conjured by the surrounding miasma. These fierce beasts fought valiantly against Worm 3, whose massive crimson sword cleaved through the air with lethal precision. Gong Shuhong appeared to be losing ground, and Worm 3 took advantage, swelling with power as he transformed into a monstrous half-man, half-worm form. His dragon-like horns gleamed, and his sword crackled with crimson energy. With a powerful swing, the sword unleashed a vast crescent-shaped blade of flame, which swept toward Gong Shuhong, disintegrating his defenses. The blood-mist tigers were destroyed in an instant, and Gong Shuhong barely had time to react as the fiery thread barreled toward him, his body already shrouded in a layer of protective crimson light. But it was too late. The thread sliced through his defenses, leaving him scorched and wounded. The space around him warped under the intensity of the attack. As Gong Shuhong's form blurred, a strange substitution technique revealed the true nature of his escape. Severed and bloodless, his left arm was gone, yet his resolve remained unbroken. However, Worm 3's relentless assault continued, sending another fiery thread at Gong Shuhong. But this time, a pillar of crimson light shot from the lake below, intercepting the attack. The light pillar trembled as it absorbed the fiery onslaught, stabilizing just in time. Gong Shuhong's grin returned as the crimson lake churned violently, rising in a spiraling vortex. Blood-red light surged into his body, restoring his strength and reforming his lost arm. The transformation continued as the lake unleashed an array of blood pillars, encircling Gong Shuhong and suffusing the cavern with a blood-curdling aura. Han Li, still battling the Crimson Fiend, felt a wave of energy wash over him. His blood slowed as the sinister law of blood affected his body, but he quickly regained control. Nearby, Worm 8 and Lu Kun felt the same oppressive force, their avatars flickering as they fought to hold their ground. Despite their rapid responses, their energies were dwindling, the life force they had drawn upon depleting faster than they could replenish. High above, Worm 3 paused, a flush of crimson spreading across his face as the blood law fluctuations began to affect him too. But with a swift motion and a deep breath, he recovered, his resolve firm. He prepared for the next phase of battle. Below, the entire Red Moon City in Kun Province quaked violently, its rivers running red with blood. As the people within the city scrambled in fear, the crimson light barriers rose, encasing the city in a sinister dome of blood. Eyes began to blink on the barrier's surface, and crimson beams shot out, transforming every living being they touched into lifeless husks of blood. The city was wiped clean in mere moments, as the blood pooled and vanished into the earth, leaving only the echo of destruction in its wake. Across the island, other cities met the same fate, the rivers flowing red and converging upon Red Moon City. From the sky, the sight of Red Moon Island, now bathed in crimson, was one of death and decay, a blood moon casting its shadow over the land. In the depths of the underground cavern, the mountain faces opened, revealing a dozen dark caves from which torrents of blood poured, cascading like waterfalls into the crimson lake below. The blood churned violently, its surface frothing as the air above buzzed with the power of a giant array formed by crimson pillars of light. Balls of fiery crimson flame surged throughout, crackling with law-infused energy that made the world's origin chi ripple and swell, amplifying the already oppressive power of laws in the air. Both Worm 8 and Lu Kun were struck by the immense pressure, their faces flushing unnaturally as blood spilled from their mouths. They staggered back, their auras flickering. In the next breath, 2 crimson humanoid figures shot toward them like arrows. Worm 8, frantic, unleashed a crescent-shaped blade of azure wind, slicing through one of the figures. Yet, the creature's body split in two, reforming and surging past him to seize his nascent soul, devouring it with a cruel cackle. Lu Kun, meanwhile, struggled to control his faltering power as he fell from the sky. With a desperate decision, he detached the head of his earthly deity avatar, causing it to explode in a wave of watery blue mist that slowed the crimson creature's approach. As the avatar's head crashed into him, Lu Kun was sent plunging into the lake, vanishing beneath its blood-stained surface. Elsewhere, Han Li faced a third crimson creature. Though affected by the law of blood, he fought with fierce resolve. His sword, a fiery red streak of law and flame, cleaved through a dozen layers of crimson barriers erected by Gong Shuhong, yet the final blow faltered as the light barriers regenerated, the law's power too great. Worm 3, caught in a vast crimson cage, unleashed fiery sword projections, only for the cage to regenerate faster than it could be destroyed. Gong Shuhong, watching from afar, unleashed his full power, summoning new pillars of crimson light and flames that racked the entire cavern. His incantations caused the lake of blood to dry, leaving only a cauldron of fiery crimson as Worm 3 struggled within, blood boiling from the heat that seeped into his flesh. Despite his efforts to ward off the suffocating flames, the law of blood still pressed down. Meanwhile, Han Li, though struggling, remained unaffected by the law to a greater extent, his resolve unwavering. As the three crimson creatures merged into one powerful avatar, a towering, blood-red figure that mirrored Gong Shuhong himself, it hurled a mass of blood toward Han Li with deadly force. Han Li's golden armored form clashed with the ball of blood, his power shattering it into mist, only for crimson chains to spring from the mist, binding him with relentless force. Gong Shuhong's earthly deity avatar, cackling, drew more blood toward Han Li, attempting to drown him in a vortex of crimson. But Han Li was not so easily overwhelmed. A deafening roar broke out as his giant mountain ape form emerged, tearing through the blood vortex with ease. Towering over the battlefield, Han Li launched a massive silver spear, its flames scorching the air as it sped toward Gong Shuhong's avatar. The crimson wheel of fire, summoned by the avatar, collided with the spear in a cataclysmic explosion. The shock waves from the blast rattled the cavern, but the spear tore through the avatar's chest, engulfing it in a blaze of silver fire. Gong Shuhong, his focus shattered, collapsed in a spray of blood as his avatar burned to nothingness.